We're going to recognize the suture. So we have the sagittal suture, then we have the coronal suture. Coronal suture is going to divide the frontal bone and the two parietals. Sagittal suture is going to divide the two parietals. Now, on the back, so then we will have the lampoid suture, right here, divide the occipital and two parietals. And then finally we have the squamous suture that is going to divide the parietal from the temporal bone. So temporal bone is the landmark from the frontal bone will be the here we have the notch, the supraorbital notch. It can be a foramen, like a little hole, and then we have the supraorbital margin, right? So that's the supraorbital margin. So then let's see with the temporal bone. The temporal bone is this bone over here, right? And the landmark that we can see from here is this projection. Now you can see a suture right here. So that's because the temporal bone stops right here. And this is called the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. So because this bone here is called the zygomatic bone. So we have zygomatic bone, and then we have the temporal process of the temporal bone. So from the outside, so we can identify here the mastoid process, the external auditory or acoustic meatus, and the stylot process, right? Tell me you can see it. Okay, so mastoid process, stylo process, and in between these two, so we have the stylomastoid foramen. I'm gonna remove I'm gonna place it here like this, so you can see better the stylomastoid foramen, right? So okay, so then this place here, when the mandible is attached, is the mandibular fossa, right? So that's the mandibular fossa, and then so that's pretty much what we're gonna identify from the outside here. Okay, so then if we open now here, so we're gonna identify the temporal bone. So right here, you can see the suture, right? The temporal bone. So from the inner part, so we're gonna identify here the internal acoustic meatus, right? So that's the internal acoustic meatus. So we're gonna identify the jugular foramen, right? On the bottom, right here, on the bottom. Sorry, I said it wrong. So this is the internal acoustic meatus. So that's the internal acoustic meatus, right? So then underneath we have the jugular foramen, and then in the opposite side we have the carotid canal, right there. Okay, so then that will be the holes that we're going to identify in the temporal bone. So then we have the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone. So I'm just going to pause the video to do, but if you want to listen here. So this is the sphenoid bone as a single bone, right? So this is the single bone right here. So you may have to identify this on the exam, but that's relatively easy. So inside here, the sphenoid bone is this one here, right? So this one here is going to be in touch with the frontal and the two temporal bone. So now bone markings of this sphenoid bone is this one here. So this area is called the sella turcica. Sella turcica. Sella means chair, and turcica means Turkish chair. You know, just like the Turkish using put in the horses. That's what they call the sella turcica. Now right here in this place, I'm gonna put my finger there. You know, right there with my finger is called the hypophyseal fossa, right? So that's where the pituitary gland is gonna be resting, right? So then we have the sella turcica, hypophyseal fossa. So then here we have the optic canal. So that's what the optic nerve coming from our brain is going to move here. See in front? See the front there? So that's the optic canal, right? So that's the optic canal there. So sella turcica, optic canal. And then what else do we have here? Oh, okay, right here. So if we move it on the back, so this part, right, so this is the maxilla here. These are called the pterygoid process. pterygoid process. Start with P-T-E-R, etc. Pterygoid process here. So you have to identify this pterygoid process. Now, if you have the bone like this, again, so you're going to identify here the sella turcica, hypophyseal fossa, right? So those are the wings of the sphenoid bone, and then on the posterior part you will have the pterygoid process, right? So that's important of this bone. So this bone is the keystone of the skull. It's the keystone because if you remove let's see, for an accident or something happened, this bone is fractured. So this bone, so all our cranium actually is going to collapse, and all our not only the cranium, this is the cranium, the flat bone, so but all our skull is going to collapse, right? So because this bone is actually in touch with pretty much all the bones, right? So with the frontal, with the parietal, with the temporal, and with the occipital. Okay, so that's the sphenoid bone. Okay, another important bone is the ethmoid. So the ethmoid bone, so you're gonna recognize it also because it's a kind of a small bone, right? So it looks like a little knot right there, right? So this is the ethmoid bone. So the ethmoid bone, this is the frontal view, right? So that will be the posterior. So now, if you see all the hole there, those are the sinuses. That way we produce mucus, right? So that when we say like that we have sinusitis, that's exactly a lot of produce. So this little thing, we're gonna put in lateral. Did you see this pointing part? It's called the crista galli, right? So then crista galli come from Latin, that means the crest of the rooster crest. You know the rooster, right? So they have the little crest. That what is called the crista galli, right? So galli, in Latin gallo, in Spanish rooster, right? So that's the crista galli. So this crista galli is, when you open the skull, is the one that you identify here, right there, right? So that's the so this part here, so all this area is called the cribriform plate. So now let's see, Ariana, can you move to the next slide so you can follow that? So then that will be the cribriform plate, right? So yes, that's the cribriform plate, right? So you have to see the crista galli right there. Okay, so and that's the things that you're going to identify from here. So in the bone here, you identify the crista galli, the cribriform plate, and then right here, right here in the middle is the perpendicular plate. This perpendicular plate is the one that in front, so you can see that bone over here. So am I pointing it right? The center, that's the perpendicular plate, right? So that over there. So now, if you can see here, so you're gonna identify these two bones right there, right? So those are the oh well, not this one here. Before that, see next to the perpendicular plate there are two little bones right there. That two little bones are called the median. The medial nasal concha will be these bones over here. See, that's what we see in the front. This one and these two bones right there, right? So that's part of the ethmoid bone. If you can see them from here, right? So we have the perpendicular plate, the superior nasal concha, and the middle nasal concha. See how the perpendicular plate go here, and then the middle nasal concha. This is the superior. We're not gonna see the superior. Well, yes, the superior all the way to the top, and then we have the middle nasal concha, right? So okay, the one that we can see here again is the middle nasal concha. Okay, yes. Okay, so that's the ethmoid bone. So we cover frontal, the temporal, the parietal. So sphenoid, temporal. Okay, the occipital. Occipital bone, remember, is being separated by the lambdoid suture. Oops. This one what is the bone markings that we're going to identify here? So obviously the suture, the lambda suture, but we're going to identify two lines here. See, here line and the other line here. Yes, so that will be the superior nuchal line. So probably you can find the occipital. Ariana, I think I have a two before this one, 2 or 3 before this one. That's the superior nasal, the superior nuchal line and the inferior nuchal line. Next one. Next one. Up, going up, go up. No, go up at the other way. Everybody can come here and listen here. I'm not saying they are taking the video share with you, but everybody can come here and listen, right? So going back one. What is the occipital? Go up one. Down, down. Okay. So that will be the next down. Next down. Now down, down. Oh, we don't have the occipital.
I don't think it's there.
Okay. Well, the occipital bone here, so we have the bone markings. There is the superior nuchal line and the inferior nuchal line. And you have to identify this little protuberance, that's the occipital protuberance, right? So this is the landmark, the bone markings for the occipital bone. Superior nuchal line, inferior nuchal line, and the occipital protuberance, right? And actually, I have in one of the semester a student that he was already with the hair, short hair, and we can see the occipital protuberance. It was really cool. I never was doing before that, the occipital protuberance. Another thing on the occipital bone is this big hole. That's the foramen magnum. So the foramen magnum is where the spinal cord is going to move, right? So not the vertebral column, different, right? Don't confuse vertebral column with spinal cord. Spinal cord is part of the nervous system, right? So here is the foramen magnum, right? So the big hole, the magnum, the big hole. And then side of this foramen magnum, we have these two little protuberance that is called the occipital condyles. Those are the occipital condyles here. So these occipital condyles are important because the atlas, that is our first vertebrae, is going to touch there. So occipital condyle, magnum foramen, inferior nuchal line, superior nuchal line, and the occipital protuberance. So those are the bone markings for the occipital bone. Okay, so now, then we have the maxilla. So the maxilla, actually there are two bones, right? So this is the maxilla. So go all the way to here, to the top here. And in the maxilla, we're gonna identify the infraorbital foramen. We have the supraorbital, supra above the orbit, and now we're gonna have the infraorbital, below, right? So the below here. So that will be the infra. So then we're gonna find the place where the teeth are gonna located. So the places where the teeth are located, this is pretty fixed. When you lose a teeth, there is a cavity there, right? Like a little hole there. No cavity, like a cavity there, but a hole there. So that is called, fossa or fovea, right? And everything here on the top, see, I don't know, well, in the video it's gonna show here. So like a little waves here in the maxilla. That's called the that's the process. That's called process. This is the fovea, and that's the foveal, the process. I'm gonna double check. I'm getting black, but that will be the process, right, where all the teeth are located. The fovea is the cavity that where the teeth are located. So now this, everybody knows that the maxilla is here, but the maxilla actually also goes underneath, right here. So you have in the practical here, and I say, name this bone right here. That's the maxilla too. So that's the maxilla here, that's the maxilla here, and in this maxilla you can see this hole over there, right? So that hole in the maxilla is called the incisive fossa, because it's right behind the incisive teeth, right? So that's the fossa there, right? Now, if you can see here, there is a suture right here, the suture aligned there. That means that's where the maxilla stops, right? So, and the bone back there, that will be the palatine bone. that you have to identify on your practical. I'm going just for the points that you have to identify. Palatine bone, so this is the maxilla, right? So, and here. So all of this is also not the palate, right? So our palate right here, that will be the bones here. Okay, other bone that you probably gonna identify is the vomer, right? So it's no big problem. Here is the vomer, it's inside here. And then you have these two bones on the back here. So we already see that the perpendicular plate and the middle nasal concha is part of the ethmoid bone. So now the other one is called the inferior nasal concha, that they are not part of any bone. Inferior nasal concha are bone of themselves. Okay, it's not part of the ethmoid bone, it's not part of the maxilla, it's not part of the vomer, right? It's just the inferior nasal concha. Okay, then we have here the nasal bone, the zygomatic bone, your cheekbone right here. This is the maxilla, that's the cheekbone, the temporal bone. So, and that's pretty much here what you have to identify in the skull right here.